Hi, Matt Sitter here, CEO of AFN. Welcome. What we believe with AFN is that change is where opportunity happens, and the best way to find opportunity in change is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. That's one of the reasons why we put together our events where we have a subject matter expert tell us about the things that are near and dear to their heart so that we can take those experiences into our own lives, into our own businesses. Today, we've got Po-Chi Wu with us. He has had an extensive career in entrepreneurship as a VC, as a professor, has worked in all sorts of different forums in different parts of the world. Today, he describes himself as an investor in human capital, and he's an active advisor at Skydeck, which is UC Berkeley's accelerator program. Co-founder and senior partner at Future Labs Consulting, where they focus on new tech that's at the intersection of some of the most revolutionary technologies that are out there: blockchain, AI, quantum computing. And today we're going to talk about generative AI and what's going on with that type of stuff in our lives. There's so much hype going on. It's unreal around this. And there's lots of opportunities to think about how this is going to impact our lives and our businesses. And we're going to deconstruct a little bit of that as we discuss today. So Po-Chi, great to have you here. And maybe could you just give us, a couple of the top line thoughts that you've got on generative AI and what you're seeing out there in the immediate term, and then we'll dive in on a couple questions.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to join the session. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and the various participants in this podcast. I want to take slight exception to the title of subject matter expert because I'm definitely not an AI expert. What I do have a lot of experience in is innovation, is how companies, major corporations as well as startups, take advantage of new technologies. And so it's more like the application, the implications of how these technologies might or might not affect different businesses, different types of businesses, and really kind of how to think about it. So the first thing, as Matt mentioned, is that, again, especially Gen AI. AI as a topic has been around for several decades. And generative AI, I think what has really amazed people is how, first of all, the interface, right? What OpenAI has done with ChatGPT to make a very, very simple, easy to use interface that really any layperson without any understanding of AI or what, just can pose some queries and get back some kind of responses. Now, that in itself is quite extraordinary. And then the way it responds is, well, the fact that it can do it so quickly, and obviously the database that it's looking at is pretty much everything on the internet, which is a staggering amount of data. It's beyond the scope of what humans can envision human beings being able to do. And so we ascribe all kinds of superpower, if you will, to this type of technology because we can't conceive of what it does. But actually, one of the things I would like to talk about today is we kind of have to set aside all that technical detail, really, of what it is, and really focus more on what actually happens when you do these queries. Again, not from a technical standpoint, but really from the recipient. What are you going to get out of it? And one of the words that you hear a lot among industry analysts who are a little bit more sophisticated is the word hallucination. Everything that comes out of the mouth of generative AI or OpenAI, ChatGPT is actually a hallucination. Now, obviously, that's not meant as a pejorative term. It is meant to describe the phenomenon that the software is designed so that it will have an answer. And it will have an answer that kind of sounds credible, sounds plausible. especially if you're not terribly knowledgeable about the topic, and if your question is not well phrased, but you'll always get an answer. And, humans, we have a certain bias toward what we think software can do for us. And there's a general trend that we tend to believe it. And this is what is so dangerous about generative AI, because it doesn't actually understand. It's not actually an artificial intelligence the way humans think about intelligence. We process information. We think of genius IQ. People like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and so on. The capacity of their brains to process information and really understand complicated issues, is clearly far superior to someone whose IQ is 50 points lower or whatever. But this software doesn't actually do that. The software really only knows how to sift through massive data sets and look for correlations, probabilities of different words and symbols that come in a particular sequence. And that's all it does. But what is so extraordinary is how it can do that and still come up with something that sounds credible. And that's the part that I think we will talk about more, which is, what is the risk? How do we interpret what we're getting from it? How do we actually use this tool? What are the functional applications where this tool can give us useful information? And here, spoiler alert, the real bottom line, I think, of today's talk is it will replace some human functions, but actually what it's going to create is a whole new class of human activity, which is about really understanding how to use the tool better, but also basically going back and trying to validate, to provide some real assurance that whatever conclusions we're getting from the software is in fact what is really needed for whatever the application is. So there is actually, it's changing the way we're going to work. Big companies, new companies, it's going to change the way industries are structured because of the way information flows. It is going to change, of course, the economics of a lot of different kinds of businesses. But at the end of the day, what's going to happen is you realize that there are still, because business is really about humans working with, serving other humans, there's always going to be a need for that more human touch, if you will, which is an understanding of empathy that goes beyond putting words and symbols together, of how human tastes evolve. And I like to, sort of summarize that by saying what this Gen AI like ChatGPT, what it actually is good at is somehow sampling our collective consciousness, right? Because it reads everything that's up in the internet and it puts this together, it can summarize, and you kind of get a sense of, okay, this is what people are thinking about and talking about. But what it cannot do is the creative side. And that's where, of course, I get most excited about the work that I do with entrepreneurs and new startups and, of course, new technologies. Back to you, Matt.
Well, yeah, so I just want to double tap on a couple things that you had to say. So thinking about this as another tool that's out there that you get to run your business, right? I like to talk about the reason why Salesforce has a 100-story building in downtown San Francisco is they were able to make a lot of money with a newer tool that they made easier to use, right? So, CRMs, that was just another tool that we had. So thinking about it that way. And then I also wanted to double tap on this idea of hallucinations. If you ask ChatGPT for a statistic, it will give one to you, and it has made it up entirely. Right. So I would say that cannot be an understated important idea to think about. It's just like saying, hey, I think a 2 next to a percentage sign looks like the right sort of answer here, so I'm going to do that. So just wanted to make sure I emphasize those. one of the things that you're an expert on how new tools come into practice within companies. And so maybe just to start thinking about this idea of how do we have experimenting with new tools as a practice, and how can we use generative AI, the ChatGPTs, as one of those things to say like, hey, how, if we're thinking about all the new tools that can come out there, how should we be treating it? How should we be thinking about it as a part of our business when we don't know exactly what it can do for us yet?
Yeah, exactly. Um, so just as we, I've been teaching entrepreneurship, as you mentioned, at the university level for almost a decade. And one of the points that I have to make for new entrepreneurs, really fresh entrepreneurs, is you've got to identify the problem first. You start with a problem first. You don't say, oh, look at all these wonderful tools I've got. How do I, apply them to solve something? That's a problem in the world. You really have to start with a problem and say, okay, how do I manage this problem? As you mentioned, something like Salesforce, CRM, the whole idea was that, especially at scale, where a company has millions of customers, how do you understand, what those customers are doing? In some, how would you organize your the data that you're getting back from what they buy, how often, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of what CRM does. It allows the salespeople and the marketing people within a company to understand what's going on with their customers. And again, the scale problem is what they're trying to solve. So with any other new tool, again, you have to say, okay, what is the problem? Now, one of the things that Gen AI is actually very good at is some kind of competitive analysis, right? If you're looking from a marketing perspective and you're trying to understand, what's going on in some particular area of your product or the technology that you're working with, or your intellectual property, looking at patents, because let's take that last one, because that's a very, very specific kind of knowledge. It is also very technical language, which again makes it more difficult for humans, but really easy for a machine to learn and understand. And it can go out there and it can search, for example, the USPTO, Patent and Trademark Office, and it can look at all kinds of patents that may or may not have a direct relationship with the intellectual property that your company is trying to develop. And it can scour that, and you can ask it a number of different questions. I think you can quite quickly get a fairly reliable report back that helps you understand what that landscape, what we call it, the patent landscape, looks like. And that is extremely valuable, extremely costly. You hire, a big law firm specializes in IP. This is $50,000, $100,000 kind of exercise, and takes several months and so on, and probably would not be as complete as this. I saw that here in the state of California, a state legislator has used ChatGPT to write legislation, some new legal regulation policy of some kind. Don't remember what the topic was, but there again, that's actually a pretty interesting application, in the sense that legal language, just like the patent stuff, legal language is very structured, and in terms of some type of policy, public policy, for, I don't know, let's say bicycle lanes in the city of San Francisco, it could come up with a pretty good assessment of, what are the things that you should be thinking about, and how would you draft? Of course, it's not a final draft, but how would you draft some legislation to protect bicyclists or whatever it is? And this could actually be better than humans could do, in the sense that it could bring a more complete perspective. But notice that what these two have in common, these two applications, first of all, they are more on the legal side, but these are linear logic problems, right? The idea is you have a big database, lots of information, and you're really looking for things that line up in a linear fashion. And there's really not a lot of creativity that's required. So that's actually pretty interesting.
When we think about, you brought up the amount of data that it's pulling from basically everything on the internet, and it's looking at these massive data sets that are out there, which makes it, you know, hugely appealing because it's sifted through all this information that's out there. And the interface, which you mentioned up front as well, is something that makes us all very comfortable talking to it. It's a way that, you know, you can just interact with something. And we are freely giving additional data into these data sets as well, you know, whether it's, you know, you hear about this with software code as well, which is something that is, you know, very formulaic in terms of how you put it together and can be understood really well. This idea of risk around it, how should we be thinking about the types of questions that we're asking or the data that we're feeding it in order to, we want to experiment with it. We want to see how it can help us, but how do we think about the risks inherent in sharing some of this information that's really important to us as well?
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant question. And I've seen a lot of, particularly the big corporations are being very, very cautious because two things. One is for a Gen AI system, if you will, to be really useful, it needs to work on their internal data. And you don't want to put that internal data up into the cloud for the Gen AI ChatGPT to work on, because then it will be available to everybody. You know, not necessarily in the usual sense of going to some folder file and so on, but the ChatGPT will know that information and will be able to use it in responding to other people's queries. So there are companies that are saying, wait a minute, you know, we can't do this. This is not a useful way because our data is extremely proprietary. We certainly don't want to share that. There are, of course, an endless list of privacy concerns, as well as, well, privacy for example, for customers, as well as for the company. So again, that's not the right way to think about it. You don't rush into a project like this. Much better to look at something that is more either like the examples I gave, something that is looking really at only public information, and then somehow, you know, having your own committee of executives try to apply those results to what is going on in your company. That would be, you know, that's one step removed. It's not asking the ChatGPT to work on your company problem as much as, you know, help me understand what I should be thinking about, and then have human beings actually do the thinking. Because remember, again, AI does not do thinking. It only does pattern matching. So there are a lot of, you know, there's a lot of reason to be cautious, aside from where we started this conversation, which is you don't know how much of what is coming back from a Gen AI, you don't know how much of that is actually reliable. And again, that requires a human agent on the afterwards to do some after processing.
Right. Well, you know, I was reading about Adobe the other day. So early success around this, Adobe actually made the decision to hold all of their assets, their photography back. It was worried that they would essentially get, you know, adapted out of the system. And they are using generative AI internally on all their own photo database, everything that they own the rights to. And they're using that to help people create images. And so they actually said, hey, we've got this risk out there. And they were very careful understanding what were the critical assets that they had and making sure that they were not adding additional risk around that as well.
Yeah, so that there's a whole nother area here of the so-called deep fakes, the images that are distorted by AI or that are recreated by AI that, you know, could resemble any one of us. And, you know, so I think that this whole problem, and again, this is of course a problem that existed in the internet, you know, before we even think about applying AI, which is, again, how do you sort what is reliable information, accurate, truthful information from all the noise and the hype and everything. Again, I'm not talking about the AI, I'm talking about the content itself. Because the problem is if the content is this mishmash of, half truths and things, then, Gen AI is simply going to pick up on that and rebroadcast that. So again, it's not a real answer. I think what we're getting right now, in maybe these 12 months, the first 12 months following the release of ChatGPT, is we have to get past the shock and awe part, the amazement, to really take it down to basics. And I think this is, again, what companies need to do, and CEOs especially, get down to the basic, the foundations. Again, what are the issues that you feel need to or can in what areas of your company can you look for improvement? And of course, that's an ongoing process. There's nothing new about that. And you have to have your executives look at all the different kinds of tools. So ultimately, AI is kind of like an automation tool. It's going to automate certain kinds of activities that either you are doing now and perhaps could do more efficiently and more effectively, or you are not doing now. You don't have people doing it because of the scale problem. And then you look to say, okay, but here's what we do manually, and here's what we need this AI to do more or less automatically for a much larger data set. But we have to understand what it is that we are trying to do. It's not trying to figure out what the AI is going to do. That's really the wrong thing. And there's a thing called the black box phenomenon, which is really a little scary, right? The expert researchers, academic researchers in AI will tell you that they don't exactly understand how it works either. I mean, of course they know how they program this thing, and we can look at the outcome, but to understand how the logic flow, if you will, of the AI, that's not so clear. And so that has not been resolved yet. And until that happens, I think we can't really look at this tool as, oh, it's going to be, a God-sent answer for all of the woes that we face.
Right. Okay, so I want to shift gears just slightly, and we'll invite people to ask questions in just a couple minutes. But thinking about like a talent management, talent development perspective. So if we think about the assembly line, revolutionary in terms of what it did for manufacturing, you taught one person how to put in a rivet perfectly, and they were doing that same motion over and over again. Now we're living in a world where, we can version just about everything with 3D printing. You can actually change what a piece of hardware looks like every single time that you make it. And so the skill set that we've got to have for individuals, they have to be adaptable. If you're going to be just the rivet person forever and ever and ever, you're going to be out of a job pretty quick. And so when we think about tools like generative AI coming on, you hear in schools, they're like, all right, hey, we're going to actually have kids use this as a tool within an assignment, and then they've got to do something on it. So when we're thinking about the talent management, talent development piece, and how we build the skill set within our own companies to be able to increase adaptability, how would you think about that with generative AI in mind?
Yeah, so that is a very big issue. And again, because the field is really so new, there is an extreme shortage. It's a highly competitive market to hire people with AI and machine learning experience. And yes, undergraduate students at universities like UC Berkeley, they're all over it. I mean, they first of all, they've been drinking the Kool-Aid, so they think it's the ultimate answer to everything. And they know that they better be in control of what the AI can do before AI takes over whatever they thought they were going to do before. I think it is a big challenge, the talent gap, if you will, is a big challenge, and especially for smaller businesses. This is going to be, and this is always true of new technology, right? It's always the rich get richer, and the ones who are less advantaged, have fewer advantages, are going to suffer more. And so I think that is part of what contributes to the shift in the industry and how industry change, and of course the opportunity for more startups to do some of these things, to make some of these tools actually more practical and useful. I think at this time there is a short-term crunch, right? Short-term, it's difficult to find these people. It's difficult to train your existing staff who may be very competent in technology and in their own operational, their functional areas. But for them to learn how to deal with this new knowledge, I think is a very big challenge. So, one of the things that we emphasize in entrepreneurship is the journey of entrepreneurship is one of continuous learning. And frankly, that's the way all of our lives should be. It's nothing to do with entrepreneurship. And businesses should also think of themselves as continuing, to meet the challenges of how quickly our world is changing, whether it's geopolitics or climate change or economics, global economics. I mean, nothing works today the way it used to work even 10 years ago. So the imperative, I think, is very, very high for companies and their executives and other staff as well to really dedicate more resources and more emphasis on this idea of we must continue to invest in our people so they can help us build the business going forward. And it's no longer, oh, well, this is the way we've done everything for the last 10 years or 20 years. And, it's doing well. We're very profitable. That's just not, you can't afford to sit back on your laurels. It'll bite you for sure.
Right. Well, I think, we have a number of CEOs in AFN that have made a really strong commitment to talent development, making sure that growth mindset is a part of how they're discussing it. And so it seems like, hey, that becomes more important, not less important in this world. If you are viewing yourself as a limited person from a talent perspective, you are going to be limited. And so how we encourage people to think beyond their boundaries is important.
Yeah, exactly. And we learn on our own, but we also have to learn more in communities. And I think that is very, very helpful when CEOs from different industries or different areas get together and share their questions, share their ideas. I think that you have a tremendous opportunity to learn so much more than if you constantly look for so-called subject matter experts who, very narrowly say, okay, here, this is what you can do. Because it's really about how we continue to build this community, right? And businesses are also, on one level, it's always a people business. On the next level, it's really about community.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to bring together all the different experiences and expertise of people to really make things go. So.
Absolutely.
All right, so that is the first half hour of our discussion. Thanks, Po Chi, on that. And very enjoyable, lots to learn around that.